Every single day, a woman somewhere loses herself trying to keep a man who was already halfway out the door. She shrinks her opinions, she swallows her anger, she cancels plans with her friends just to be available for a man who barely notices she's there. And here's the tragic part. The more she gives, the less he values it. Because psychology doesn't work the way we were taught it does. We were told that love means sacrifice, that loyalty means staying no matter what, that if you just try a little harder, love a little deeper, forgive a little faster, he'll finally see your worth. But what if everything you were taught about keeping a man is actually the exact reason you keep losing him? What if the very thing that feels like weakness, walking away, letting go, choosing yourself, is actually the single most powerful psychological force a woman can hold in any relationship? There is a certain kind of woman who never begs, never chases, never shrinks herself to fit into a man's inconsistency. And strangely, she is the one men can't stop thinking about. Today, we're going to break down exactly why that happens, the psychology behind it, and how you can become her. But stay until the end, because what I'm about to tell you next will completely change how you see love, attachment, and your own power. Here's something most people don't want to admit. The human brain is wired for loss aversion. That means we feel the pain of losing something almost twice as intensely as we feel the pleasure of gaining it. This isn't opinion, it's basic behavioral psychology. And it explains something that confuses so many women. Why a man can seem distant, indifferent, even careless about a relationship right up until the moment she actually starts pulling away. Suddenly he's calling more. Suddenly he's asking where she's been. Suddenly he's doing the things she begged him to do for months. It's not because he came to his senses. It's because his brain registered a potential loss, and loss aversion kicked in like a survival instinct. This is the exact moment I want you to sit with, because right after this, I'm going to show you the one mistake almost every woman makes at this exact point. A mistake that undoes everything and sends him right back into comfortable, careless behavior. If you've ever wondered why the moment you get his attention back, things fall apart again a few weeks later, this is the part you need to hear. Now let's slow down and really understand what's happening underneath the surface. Because this isn't about manipulation or playing games. This is about understanding human attachment on a deeper level. When a woman constantly proves her love through availability, through chasing, through over-explaining and over-giving, she unintentionally signals something to the nervous system of the person she's with. She signals certainty. And certainty, as strange as it sounds, kills desire. Desire is fueled by a small, healthy amount of uncertainty, by the awareness that something valuable could be lost. This doesn't mean you should be cold, distant, or manipulative. It means that a woman who has her own life, her own goals, her own sense of identity outside the relationship naturally creates a kind of magnetic uncertainty, not because she's playing hard to get, but because she genuinely doesn't need to cling. And that difference matters more than anything else in this entire video. So hold on to that thought. Think about the woman who can walk away. Not the woman who threatens to leave every time she's upset. Not the woman who uses silence as a weapon. But the woman who has quietly built a life so full, so meaningful, so centered around her own healing and growth that she doesn't need anyone to complete her. She goes to work and she's respected. She has friendships that pour into her. She has hobbies, goals, a version of herself she's proud of when she looks in the mirror. And when a man comes into her life and starts showing inconsistency, hot one day, cold the next, affectionate then distant, she doesn't spiral. She doesn't sit by her phone refreshing it every 5 minutes. She doesn't rehearse conversations in her head, trying to figure out what she did wrong. She simply observes. And if the pattern continues, she removes herself quietly, without drama, without ultimatums. And that quiet removal is more powerful than any argument, any tears, any pleading ever could be. Here's why. Human beings, and men especially, because of how status and pursuit are wired into male psychology, place value on things based on scarcity and effort. If something is always available, always guaranteed, always there no matter how it's treated, the brain stops registering it as valuable. This isn't about a woman being hard to get. This is about a fundamental truth of human perception. We don't appreciate what we assume will always be there. We appreciate what we understand we could lose. A woman who can walk away isn't manipulating this principle. She's simply living a life so aligned with her own worth that she naturally embodies it. She's not performing detachment. She has real detachment because she has already decided that her peace matters more than any relationship that requires her to lose herself. Now, I want you to think about your own life for a second. Think about a time when you wanted something so badly, a job, a friendship, even an approval from someone, and in the moment you stopped chasing it, it seemed to come to you. Or think about the opposite, something you had that you took for granted until the moment you almost lost it, and suddenly it became the most important thing in the world. This is not coincidence. This is a documented psychological pattern called reactance theory. When we perceive that our freedom to have or keep something is threatened, we desire it more intensely. This is why ultimatums so often fail, but quiet, genuine detachment succeeds. An ultimatum says, change or I'll leave, which triggers defensiveness. Genuine detachment says nothing at all. It simply removes the guarantee, and the mind fills in the rest. But here's where so many women get this wrong. And this is important, so listen closely. They try to fake this. They read about this concept and think, okay, I'll just act distant. I'll play it cool. I'll pretend I don't care. But here's the problem. People can feel the difference between real detachment and performed detachment. Real detachment comes from a place of security. Performed detachment comes from a place of anxiety, wearing a mask. And on a subconscious level, the person you're trying to influence can sense that mask. They can feel the tension underneath the calm exterior. They can feel that you're waiting, hoping, secretly checking your phone the second they're not looking. This is why so many women try the walk away technique and it backfires because they weren't actually walking away. They were performing walking away while emotionally still standing right there, waiting to be chased. The woman who genuinely controls the emotional temperature of a relationship isn't performing anything. She has done the internal work first. She has looked at her own patterns. Maybe she grew up in a household where love felt conditional, where she had to earn affection through good behavior or achievement. And so she carries that wound into her adult relationships, believing she has to prove her worth constantly to be loved. Or maybe she had a previous relationship where she was left without explanation. And now she overcompensates by trying to control the outcome through excessive effort, thinking if she just does everything right, she can prevent abandonment. These patterns are called attachment styles, and understanding yours is the first step to breaking the cycle that keeps attracting the wrong kind of attention or keeps you giving too much to people who give too little. If you find yourself constantly over explaining your feelings, apologizing even when you've done nothing wrong, feeling anxious when someone takes too long to text back, or finding yourself attracted to people who are emotionally unavailable, these are signs of what psychologists call anxious attachment. It's not a character flaw. It's a survival response your nervous system developed, likely in childhood, to keep connections safe by making yourself as agreeable and available as possible. The problem is, in adult relationships, this pattern often attracts people with avoidant tendencies, people who pull away when someone gets too close. And the two patterns create a painful cycle. She chases, he retreats. He retreats, she chases harder. And around it goes, both people exhausted, neither person getting what they actually need. The way out of this cycle isn't learning tricks or techniques to manipulate someone into staying. The way out is what therapists call earned secure attachment, becoming, through conscious effort, the kind of person who doesn't need external validation to feel whole. This is deep, real work. It means learning to sit with discomfort without immediately needing to fix it through someone else's attention. It means building a relationship with yourself so strong that another person's inconsistency doesn't shake your entire sense of identity. It means grieving old wounds instead of reenacting them in every new relationship, hoping this time will be different. And when a woman does this work, real work, not performative detachment, something remarkable happens. She stops needing to walk away as a strategy because she's simply no longer willing to stay in situations that don't serve her. The walking away becomes a natural boundary, not a manufactured power move. Let's talk about why this specific quality, the ability to genuinely walk away, is so rare and why it captures attention so intensely when someone encounters it. Most people, if we're honest, are terrified of loss. We are wired for connection because for most of human history, being cast out of the tribe meant death. Our nervous systems still carry that ancient programming, even though today, losing a relationship won't kill us physically. But emotionally, the fear feels just as primal. This is why so many people stay in relationships that hurt them. Not because they don't see the red flags, but because the fear of being alone, the fear of starting over, the fear of proving their own insecurities right feels more unbearable than the pain of staying. And when someone encounters a person who has genuinely transcended that fear, who values their peace more than the comfort of familiarity, it's almost magnetic because it represents a kind of freedom most people secretly long for, but haven't found the courage to claim. I want you to consider something for a moment. Have you ever met someone, maybe a friend, a coworker, even a stranger you observed from a distance, who just seemed unbothered? Not in a cold way, not in a way that seemed fake, but genuinely at peace with themselves. They weren't desperate for approval. They weren't chasing likes, validation, or constant reassurance. They simply existed, fully themselves, taking up space without apology. Didn't something about that draw you in? That's the energy we're talking about. That's the energy that makes a woman who can walk away impossible to ignore. Not because she's cold or unattainable in a superficial sense, but because she radiates a kind of self respect that most people are still fighting to find in themselves. Now, here's something that might be uncomfortable to hear, but it needs to be said. Some women use the idea of walking away as a threat. Repeat it so often it loses all meaning. She says she's leaving and then she doesn't. She packs a bag and unpacks it the next morning. She blocks his number and unblocks it by nightfall. And every time this happens, the psychological principle we've been discussing gets weaker and weaker because the brain learns through repetition. If you threaten to leave and never do, the other person's nervous system stops registering the threat as real. It becomes background noise, like a car alarm that goes off so often the neighborhood stops hearing it. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. A woman who calmly and quietly follows through on her boundaries, even once, communicates more power than a woman who dramatically threatens to leave 100 times and never does. This brings us to one of the most important psychological truths in this entire conversation. Boundaries are not about controlling another person's behavior. They're about defining what you will and will not accept in your own life and then honoring that definition regardless of how the other person responds. A boundary isn't, if you don't change, I'll leave, delivered as a manipulation tactic to force change. A real boundary is, this behavior isn't acceptable to me, and if it continues, I will remove myself because my peace matters. The difference is subtle but profound. One is about controlling someone else. The other is about respecting yourself. And ironically, it's the second one, the one that isn't even trying to control the other person's behavior, that tends to actually inspire change because people respect what they cannot manipulate and they take for granted what they can. Let's bring this into a real relatable scenario because I know some of you watching this are living through exactly this right now. Imagine a woman in a relationship where her partner is inconsistent. Some days he's affectionate, attentive, saying all the right things. Other days he's distant, short with his responses, seemingly annoyed by her presence. She spends her energy trying to figure out what changed. Did she say something wrong? Is he losing interest? Should she text him first or wait for him to reach out? This mental loop is exhausting and it's a trap because she's giving her emotional energy to a variable she cannot control: his mood, his behavior, his choices. The woman who has done the internal work responds differently. She notices the inconsistency. She names it honestly to herself, and instead of spiraling into anxious analysis, she redirects her energy back into her own life. She goes to the gym. She calls a friend. She works on the goals that matter to her, not as a performance to make him jealous, but because she genuinely refuses to let someone else's inconsistencies dictate her inner peace. And this is the exact moment where the psychological shift happens. Because now, instead of two people locked in an anxious chase, there is one person standing steady, and the other person, sensing that steadiness, either rises to meet it or reveals that they were never capable of consistency to begin with. Either way, she wins because she either gets the relationship she deserves or she gets her freedom back. I want to pause here and ask you something important because this next part might sting a little, but it's necessary. Are you currently in a pattern where your happiness rises and falls based entirely on someone else's mood? Do you find yourself checking your phone, reading messages over and over, trying to decode hidden meaning in a single word response? If so, this isn't a sign that you love too much. It's a sign that somewhere along the way, you learned that love requires vigilance, that safety requires control, that if you just watch closely enough, you can prevent the pain of being left. But real love, the kind that lasts, doesn't require that level of exhausting monitoring. Real love feels like relief, not anxiety. And if what you're experiencing feels more like a constant low grade fear than peace, that's information. That's your own psychology telling you something important, and it deserves to be heard. Let's talk about what actually happens in the brain and body of a man, or anyone really, when they encounter someone who genuinely doesn't need them to be happy. There's a concept in psychology called the paradox of pursuit. The more someone senses they're being chased, the more their brain associates that dynamic with obligation rather than desire. And obligation kills attraction. But the moment that pursuit stops and the person realizes the other party is fully capable of moving forward without them, something shifts. The brain reclassifies the situation. What was once taken for granted becomes something that requires active effort to keep. This is not manipulation. This is basic human motivation science. We work harder for things that require effort and carry the possibility of loss. And we take for granted things that are guaranteed no matter what we do. This is why some of the most loving, giving, devoted women end up in the most unbalanced relationships. Their love, given so freely and without condition, is misread by the other person's nervous system as guaranteed, and guaranteed things, sadly, don't activate the same emotional investment as things that feel uncertain. Now, some of you might be thinking, so does that mean I have to be distant and unavailable forever to keep someone interested? And the answer is no, and this is really important to understand because misunderstanding this point is where so many relationship advice videos go wrong. The goal isn't to manufacture permanent distance. The goal is authenticity paired with self-respect. A securely attached woman, one who has genuinely done the work, isn't distant because she's playing a game. She's naturally balanced because she has a full life, healthy boundaries, and an internal locus of validation, meaning her sense of worth comes from within rather than from someone else's approval. She can be warm, affectionate, and deeply loving, and still walk away without hesitation if she's treated poorly, because those two things aren't contradictions. In fact, the ability to love deeply and the ability to walk away when necessary come from the exact same source: genuine self-respect. Let's go a little deeper into the psychology of why walking away feels so difficult for so many people, even when they know, logically, that a relationship isn't good for them. This connects to something called the sunk cost fallacy, the idea that the more time, energy, and emotional investment we've already put into something, the harder it becomes to walk away, even when continuing no longer makes sense. Our brains hate the idea of wasting what we've already invested, so we keep investing more, hoping to eventually justify the original investment, even as the situation gets worse. This is why women often stay in relationships far longer than they should, not because they don't see the problems, but because 3 years, 5 years, 10 years of history feels too heavy to walk away from. But here's the psychological reframe that changes everything. The time you've already spent is gone either way. It cannot be recovered by staying longer. The only question that actually matters is this: knowing what you know now, would you choose this relationship again today? If the answer is no, then staying isn't honoring your past investment. It's compounding your losses moving forward. I know this is a lot to process, and some of what I'm saying might be hitting close to home for some of you watching right now. That's okay. That discomfort you're feeling is often the exact sign that something needs to change. Growth rarely feels comfortable in the moment it's happening. But I want you to understand something clearly before we go further. This isn't about becoming cold, unfeeling, or emotionally unavailable as some kind of defense mechanism. That's not power, that's just a different kind of wound dressed up to look like strength. True power, the kind we're talking about today, comes from emotional wholeness, not emotional armor. It comes from healing the parts of yourself that learn to equate love with anxiety, worth with performance, and safety with control. When you heal those parts, walking away stops being a strategy you have to force yourself to execute, and it becomes simply what you do naturally when something no longer aligns with the life you're building. Let's talk about identity because this is really the core of everything we've discussed so far. So many women, without even realizing it, build their entire sense of identity around a relationship. Their mood depends on his mood. Their day is made or ruined based on a text message. Their future plans revolve entirely around what he wants, what makes him comfortable, what keeps him happy. And when a relationship becomes someone's entire identity, losing that relationship feels like losing themselves, which is why the fear of walking away becomes so paralyzing. But the woman who can genuinely walk away has built an identity independent of any single relationship. Her sense of self is made up of many things: her career, her friendships, her creativity, her faith, her personal growth, her hobbies, her sense of humor, her values. A relationship is one thread in a much larger tapestry, not the entire fabric of who she is. And because of that, losing a relationship, while painful, doesn't unravel her entire sense of self. She can grieve, she can feel the loss deeply, and still know, without question, that she will be okay because her identity was never solely dependent on being chosen by someone else. This is the real secret behind why this quality is so magnetic and why it isn't actually about manipulation tactics at all, even though so much relationship content online frames it that way. It's not about learning the perfect words to say or the perfect amount of time to wait before texting back. It's about becoming, at your core, a person who doesn't need anyone's validation to feel complete. And when you become that person, you naturally stop tolerating relationships that require you to shrink, to beg, to chase, or to constantly prove your worth. You naturally start attracting people who match that same level of emotional security because like attracts like on a subconscious level. Anxious energy tends to attract avoidant energy, but secure energy tends to attract secure energy. So the real work isn't learning how to walk away as a manipulation tactic. The real work is healing to the point where walking away from anything that disrespects you becomes your natural baseline, not a performance you have to force yourself into. I want you to think about the relationships in your life right now, romantic or otherwise, and ask yourself honestly, where am I giving more than I'm receiving and pretending it doesn't hurt? Where am I making myself smaller to keep someone comfortable? Where am I waiting for someone to choose me instead of choosing myself first? These questions aren't comfortable, But comfort was never going to get you to where you actually want to be. Real change requires honesty, and sometimes the most honest thing you can do is admit that you've been settling, not because you don't deserve more, but because somewhere along the way, you convinced yourself that this was all you could get or all you were allowed to ask for. Here's something else worth understanding. Walking away doesn't always mean the relationship ends forever. Sometimes walking away is the very thing that allows a relationship to reset onto healthier ground. When one person stops absorbing all the emotional labor of keeping things together, the other person is forced to either step up and meet them halfway or reveal that they were never truly invested to begin with. Either outcome gives you information you needed. If they step up genuinely, not out of temporary fear of loss, but through real, sustained effort, then the relationship has a chance to become something healthier than it was before. If they don't step up, then you've saved yourself months or years of pouring into someone who was never going to reciprocate. And that, as painful as it feels in the moment, is a gift, even if it doesn't feel like one right away. Let's also address something important. This isn't just relevant for romantic relationships. This principle applies to friendships, to family dynamics, even to how we show up at work. The ability to walk away calmly and without drama from anything that consistently disrespects your time, your energy, or your worth is one of the most powerful psychological tools a person can develop in any area of life. Employees who understand their own value negotiate better salaries because they're not desperate, and it shows. Friends who understand their own value don't tolerate one-sided friendships because they know their presence is valuable and shouldn't be taken for granted. This entire concept, at its heart, isn't really about relationships with other people at all. It's about your relationship with yourself and whether that relationship is strong enough to sustain you through the discomfort of choosing your own peace over someone else's convenience. I know some of you are watching this video because you're going through something right now. Maybe you're sitting there, phone in hand, waiting for a response that isn't coming as fast as you need it to. Maybe you're replaying a conversation, wondering what you could have said differently. Maybe you already know, deep down, what you need to do, but you're scared because walking away feels like losing, even when staying is what's actually costing you the most. I want you to hear this clearly. Choosing yourself is never the wrong decision, even when it's the hardest one. The temporary pain of walking away is almost always smaller than the long, slow erosion of staying somewhere that requires you to disappear a little more each day just to keep the peace. So, here's what I want you to take from everything we've talked about today. The woman who can walk away isn't cold. She isn't manipulative. She isn't playing games or following a script to trick someone into staying. She has simply done the deep, uncomfortable work of building a life and an identity so full that she no longer needs anyone else to complete her. She loves deeply, but she doesn't lose herself in the process. She gives generously, but she doesn't give beyond her own limits just to be chosen. And because of that quiet, earned security, she becomes someone that people don't want to lose. Not because she's trying to be unattainable, but because her presence feels different. Steady, whole, unshaken by inconsistency, unwilling to beg for what should be freely given. That energy cannot be faked and it cannot be rushed. It's built slowly through healing, through self-respect, through choosing yourself again and again until it becomes second nature rather than a struggle. If any part of this video resonated with you, if you saw yourself somewhere in these words, I want you to really sit with that feeling instead of brushing it aside. Change doesn't happen by accident. It happens when we get honest about the patterns we've been repeating and decide consciously to build something different. That might mean setting a boundary you've been avoiding. It might mean having a conversation you've been putting off. It might mean, for some of you, finally walking away from something you've known for a long time wasn't serving you. Whatever it looks like for you, Know that the version of you who chooses herself fully and unapologetically is worth becoming, even if it takes time to get there. Before you go, I want to leave you with a question, and I genuinely want you to answer it in the comments below, because I think your answer might help someone else who's reading through them feeling exactly like you are right now. Is there a relationship in your life right now where you're giving more than you're receiving? And if so, what is one small step you could take this week to start choosing yourself again? Take a moment, really think about it, and share it below. Your honesty might be exactly what someone else needed to read today.